So long before tulips became the main event here on our farm each spring, daffodils were actually the crop that helped me find my footing. They were one of the very first flowers that I ever planted with the hope of using them in spring arrangements. I remember I tucked a handful of bulbs into my garden one fall without much expectation at all, and I was pleasantly surprised by how easily they grew, how early they bloomed, and how useful they became in those quiet weeks before the rest of the garden woke up. Now, back then, I didn't know much about all the different types available. Like most people, I assumed that daffodils were just bold yellow trumpets. And while those certainly have their place, well, there's an entire world of varieties that exist beyond just that. Over time, I've discovered doubles with frilly petals, miniature types that work beautifully in flower crowns and posies, and some soft-toned varieties so romantic they've stopped me in my tracks. Now, today, daffodils aren't necessarily the focus of our spring season, but I still love having them in the mix. They're incredibly low maintenance, reliable as ever, and the perfect crop to pull from when the inevitable early season design request rolls in. So in this video, I'm sharing some of my absolute favorite varieties, the ones I turn to again and again. And to make it more fun and perhaps more helpful, I'm going to rate each one based on 3 simple categories: visual impact, customer appeal, and design versatility. By the end of this video, you'll know which daffodils have truly earned their place in our patch, and maybe you'll spot a few new favorites of your own. I'll admit, over the years, my own collection of daffodils has grown more than I ever expected. What started out as just a handful of bulbs has become a bit of a seasonal ritual, adding a few new varieties each fall, always thinking that this will be the year that I finally had enough. And yet somehow, there's always another treasure waiting to be discovered. Daffodils, they're incredibly diverse, and part of what makes them so endlessly charming is the variety of forms they take on. So to help you navigate all the options and to narrow in on the ones worth growing, I've grouped my favorites by type. Let's start with the double daffodils. Now, these are the showstoppers. Full, frilly, and often fragrant, double daffodils look more like peonies than the bold yellow trumpets that most people expect. They're perfect when you want something romantic, ruffled, and just a bit unexpected. The first in this group is Delna Shaw. This one brings the drama in all the best ways. Blush pink and white layers twist together into a full ruffled bloom. It's one of those flowers that makes even the simplest arrangement feel just a little bit more elevated. For me, this variety starts us off strong, a solid 9 out of 10. Up close, the soft romantic tones and layered petals create such a beautiful texture. It's a strong performer in the field too, with long sturdy stems that hold up well in bouquets. The only drawback in my opinion, and mind you this is being very critical, but the muted coloring doesn't always stand out as a prominent focal flower in brighter spring arrangements. Still, it's a beauty that I reach for quite often. Replete. Now this one's a little wild, a little unruly, but totally lovable. Its peach and white ruffles, they never bloom quite the same way twice, which makes every stem feel like its own little work of art. For me, this variety earns a strong 8.5 out of 10. I love the richer, more saturated colors. It brings a welcome boldness to spring arrangements. It's also a solid grower in our field with sturdy stems that hold up those big blooms without any issue. Now, if I had one small critique, it's that the outer petals tend to reflex back a bit more than I'd prefer. Sometimes the center ends up sitting forward rather than framed neatly by a flat backdrop. But even with that, it's still a bloom I look forward to seeing each year. Okay, White Lion. Soft, buttery yellow and white petals that open in full, creamy layers. It feels vintage and romantic, like something you'd find pressed in the pages of an old book. I give this one a solid 8 out of 10. I really love the soft hints of yellow. It feels like a subtle nod to the more traditional daffodil, but with ivory petals that give it that more slightly refined and elevated look. It's also a great grower in the field, reliably coming back strong year after year. Now, that said, I did take off a couple of points because it doesn't always stand out amongst the other doubles that I grow. It's easy to confuse this variety with similar varieties like lingerie, which I'll talk more about here soon. When you're growing a large collection, the uniqueness factor matters. And for me, this one blends in a bit more than it stands out. So let's talk About Optum. This one can almost pass for a peony at first glance. The petals are full with layers that billow softly, like those big, dreamy clouds that hang in the air on a still summer afternoon. The blooms open in a soft ivory with just a hint of warm cream, and there's something about the loose, layered form that feels both airy and elegant. It's understated, but gorgeous. I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Now, if you gravitate toward clean, crisp florals that still feel special, you'll probably love this one too. The blooms are large and surprisingly durable, even through unpredictable spring weather. There's nothing traditional about this daffodil, and maybe that's exactly why I love it. It's a refreshing twist on the classic daffodil shape, and one I'm always happy to see pop up in our field. Next up is lingerie. The name makes you think of something delicate, and this variety delivers on that promise. Lingerie, it opens into a beautifully layered bloom with snow white petals and golden yellow accents tucked right into the center. The overall shape is full and ruffled, but still feels neat and perfectly formed. It's outward facing and held on strong, sturdy stems, which makes it easy to work with in the field or in the vase. I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. The fragrance alone makes it worth growing. I mean, there's something really nostalgic and sweet about the scent that sets it apart from other daffodils. Now, that said, it hasn't been a top pick for our market customers who tend to gravitate more toward blush and apricot tones. So while it may not be my most useful variety, sales-wise, it's still one that I enjoy growing for personal use. And your own customers, well, they might respond to it differently. Let's switch it up and talk about Les Torches. This one is pure sunshine, but with a twist. Bright yellow petals layered with bold orange ruffles in the center. It's full and vibrant and has this fiery personality that makes it feel like the life of the spring garden. Les Torches was actually one of the first brighter yellow varieties that I added to my collection. Early on, I leaned heavily towards whites and ivories, anything soft and subtle. But in an effort to bring a little bit of balance back to the early spring garden, I gave this one a try, probably my second or third year growing, and it added such a fun pop of color among all those quieter tones. The deeply saturated hues are just joyful. Every time it blooms, I can't help but smile. Now, that said, not everyone's after this kind of brightness. While I see Les Torches as a great way to break up the monotony of all the romantic pastel shades, most of my market customers tend to prefer those softer colors, especially if they're just starting to explore daffodils. So from a flower farming and sales perspective, I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It's still one of my personal favorites, but not always the most versatile for arranging or for selling. Let's talk about Queen's Day. So layers of petals and alternating shades of rich goldenrod and vibrant honey gold make this ultra ruffled variety feel like a celebration in bloom. It's bold, it's cheerful, and adds a burst of energy wherever it's planted. This one was named after the former Dutch national holiday, Queen's Day, and it brings a little royalty to the garden. I give this one a solid 8 out of 10. Yes, it's yellow, and I've said before that yellow varieties aren't always our top sellers, but this one is different. There's a richness and a depth to the color that gives it a bit more elevated, luxurious feel. Combine that with its beautiful form and reliable field performance, and you've got a variety that really checks all the right boxes. Now, similar but different is Dick Wilden. Big and buttery and completely unapologetic, this one blooms in rich layers of golden yellow and feels like the most classic spring flower, just with a whole lot more volume. For me, this one surprisingly gets a 7 out of 10. We added it to the garden just last fall, and because it's such a well-known and widely loved variety, I had pretty high expectations. And while it is beautiful and definitely brings that classic cheerful daffodil feel, I found myself a little underwhelmed. The form is full and traditional, which I appreciate, but compared to some of the other varieties we grow, the color just didn't feel as saturated or striking. Still lovely, but maybe not quite the standout that I hoped it would be. So moving on to the next category. If you're craving something a little bit more artistic, well, these next daffodils are for you. Sometimes called butterfly daffodils, split cups have unique open face centers that almost look like little pinwheels. They add whimsy, movement, and just the right touch of surprise to any spring bouquet. Let's start with Apricot Whirl. This one feels like a little swirl of spring sunshine. The center is deeply frilled in warm apricot tones, flaring out against soft ivory petals. It's airy, elegant, and always a little different in the best way possible. I give this one a solid 8 out of 10. The blooms are larger than I expected, with sturdy stems that hold them up beautifully. I simply adore all the ruffles on this butterfly type. I mean, it really makes a statement, whether bunched on its own or mixed into an early spring arrangement. The only thing to note is that it tends to be a bit shorter than some of the others that we grow. Still, the stems are long enough to be useful in a variety of designs, and the unique form more than makes up for this slightly smaller stature. Next on the list is Orangery. Definitely not your average daffodil. It has a bold, open cup that flattens out to a little orange sunburst. Now, in full transparency, I did not expect to love this variety as much as I actually do. I originally ordered it as a substitute when Apricot Whirl was out of stock. I'd seen it offered for years, but the catalog photos never quite sold me. Still, I gave this variety a chance, and I was shocked by how much I ended up enjoying it. Now, to be fair, it's a recent addition to our collection, and sometimes the novelty of a new bloom can make it feel a little more exciting than it really is. But even with that in mind, this one impressed me. The blooms are slightly smaller than Apricot Whirl, and the cup is definitely more of a true tangerine. It's a brighter, more vivid tone, but I actually think the smaller flower size works in its favor. The stems are strong and the blooms stand tall, and unlike Apricot Whirl, they don't tend to nod or face downward. It adds a playful pop of color to spring bouquets while still offering plenty of ivory to soften the palette. All in all, it earns a strong 8.5 out of 10 from me.
And if you're wondering how Apricot Whirl and Orangery stack up side by side, well, here's a look at both blooms together. You can really see the contrast in color and form. Apricot Whirl leans softer and more romantic with its ivory petals and ruffled apricot center, while Orangery brings a brighter, bolder energy with that vivid orange flare. Now, both are beautiful in their own right, and seeing them together really shows just how much variation exists between the two.
Okay, the next category is large cup daffodils. These are just a little bit more refined. Large cup daffodils still have that classic look, but the cup is slightly shorter and often more decorative. Think ruffled edges, flared shapes, or striking color contrast. They're reliable bloomers with a bit of flair, which makes them great for both spring plantings and bouquet work. The first in this category is precocious. This one feels like spring in bloom, bright, playful, and full of personality. Ivory outer petals surround a ruffled center and rich salmon tones that soften toward the edges. It's bold without being too much and brings such a cheerful energy to the garden. I give this variety a strong 9 out of 10. It's been a reliable performer in our field year after year, with outward-facing blooms held tall on long, sturdy stems. The color is vivid enough to pop in arrangements, but still refined enough to feel versatile, and our customers really respond to it. It's one of those varieties that manages to stand out and play well with others, which makes it both a favorite in the patch and with our customers. Okay, let's talk about Ice King. This one is a real beauty. Big, soft blooms that open in pale yellow and gradually fade to a creamy white. The center is full and ruffled with just enough drama to catch your eye without ever feeling overdone. One of the things that I love most about Ice King is its crimped outer petals. Like gently pleated fabric, they give the bloom this lovely texture that adds softness and interest. I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. Truthfully, I have a soft spot for this variety. It was one of the very first daffodils that I ever planted in my garden, and there's something about it that always feels like home. But from a flower farming perspective, it hasn't held up quite as well in the field as others that I grow. The blooms can be more sensitive to weather, and I often find myself letting them blow open just so that I can enjoy them in the garden rather than harvesting them to sell. It may not be the most durable, but it still holds a special place in my spring lineup. Of course, we have to talk about the classic Trumpet daffodils. If you're drawn to the traditional daffodil look, these are the ones to grow. Trumpet types have that iconic shape, big blooms with a long, prominent cup that matches or even exceeds the length of the petals. They're bold, cheerful, and they feel like the daffodils that you grew up seeing, only better. Perfect for naturalizing or making a strong statement in early spring designs. First up is Mount Hood. Now this is a true classic, all white with a trumpet that starts out a soft pale yellow and fades to ivory as it matures. It's one of the earliest daffodils to bloom in our patch, and a sure sign that spring is finally on its way. Now, much to my surprise, I'm giving this one a solid 9 out of 10. I'll admit there might be a little novelty bias here. Mount Hood is a relatively new addition to our garden, and I don't grow many trumpet types, so the uniqueness factor definitely plays a role in how much I've enjoyed this variety. When I first started planting daffodils, I was so drawn to anything but traditional. I wanted the big, luxurious doubles that barely resembled a daffodil at all. Trumpet types just didn't excite me. But Mount Hood has me wanting to add even more trumpet-style daffodils to the garden. It's understated, it's elegant and quietly stylish. While it might not pop the way brighter varieties do in an early spring landscape, bring just a few of these stems inside and it absolutely shines. I fell in love with Mount Hood this year, and I have a feeling that it's going to become one of those dependable, quietly beautiful staples that I look forward to every spring. Let's talk about Pink Charm. Now, don't let the soft coloring fool you. This one makes a statement. Bright white petals frame a long salmon pink cup that gently fades at the edges. It's elegant, structured, and one of the prettiest trumpet-style daffodils that I've ever grown. This variety earns a solid 8 out of 10 from me. It's dainty and elevated in all the best ways, like a modern refined twist on a classic form. It also performs reliably in the field and always feels like a breath of fresh air in early spring designs. If I had to be critical, the stems can be a little thinner and slightly shorter than some of the other varieties that I grow, but they're still plenty long enough to work with. All in all, a lovely bloom that brings just the right amount of softness and grace. Next up is Popeye. This one's a little unexpected in the best way possible. Creamy white outer petals frame a plump, ruffled trumpet packed with layers of soft yellow, giving it a look that's both playful and decadent. The form is a bit quirky, almost like it's doing its own thing, and that's exactly what makes it so charming. I started growing Popeye purely for myself, drawn to its unique structure and character. It is a more recent addition to our garden, so I haven't yet offered it to our customers, but I could see it sparking some curiosity. Now the blooms are held on sturdy stems, and their distinctive shape adds a fun twist to spring arrangements. Whether or not it becomes a customer favorite remains to be seen, but for now, it's a delightful personal pick that earns a 7.5 out of 10 in my book. Last but certainly not least are the clustered flower daffodils. These varieties, they produce multiple blooms per stem, giving you more movement, texture, and visual interest from a single bulb. They're especially lovely in bouquets where they add a soft, layered look without needing as many stems to fill things out. While many are fragrant, it's really their form that makes them a standout. The first one we're going to talk about is geranium. I love how light and airy this one feels. With bright white petals and small orange cups, each stem holds several dainty blooms that dance a little in the breeze. It's perfect for softening up a spring arrangement, and the fragrance is just as sweet as the look. I give geranium a strong 8.5 out of 10. I've always had a soft spot for miniature blooms, and this one is no exception. Just a few stems can add so much charm and flair to a bouquet. Even on their own, there's something truly special about the delicacy of these flowers. It's quite similar in feel to Sir Winston Churchill, which we'll talk about next, but if I had to choose between the two, geranium might have the slight edge, simply because that bright orange center really pops. So let's talk about Sir Winston Churchill. This one's a favorite for a reason. The blooms are creamy white with soft hints of saffron tucked between layers of petals, and the scent is incredible. It's sweet, nostalgic, and almost comforting, like something pulled from a springtime memory. At a quick glance, this variety often reminds me of buttered popcorn in the best way possible. It's soft, layered, and warm-toned. I give Sir Winston Churchill a solid 8 out of 10. It's one of the last varieties to bloom in the field each season, and it always feels like a sweet, quiet send-off to daffodil season. I love the softness it brings to spring arrangements. For anyone who truly loves daffodils, I think this is a must grow.
Now, here again, I want to give you a true side-by-side comparison so you can truly get a feel for how similar yet different these two varieties actually are. Now, both have that sweet clustered form, and trust me, both have an incredible scent. But geranium stands out with its bright white petals and cheerful orange centers, while Sir Winston Churchill has a creamier, softer look with warm tones tucked between the ruffles. They play a similar role in a bouquet, but each definitely brings its own vibe.
So if you haven't been keeping track and you're wondering which varieties came out on top for me, it was Delna Shaw, Precocious, and Mount Hood. All scored high across the board. Now each one brings something different to the table, whether it's romance or vibrancy or quiet elegance, and I'd happily grow them again and again. Now if I'm being honest, this whole thing really isn't about the scores. Because when I think about daffodils, what they've meant to me over the years, I don't think about the numbers. I think about that first fall that I planted bulbs and didn't expect much. I think about how surprised I was when they came up, early, cheerful, and full of life. I think about how they made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was figuring this flower farming thing out. That's the quiet magic of daffodils. They show up when everything else is still waking up. They ask for so little and give so much, and whether you grow a handful or a whole field, they have this way of reminding you that beauty doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful. So maybe the best daffodil variety isn't the one with the highest rating. Maybe it's the one that made you pause, the one you reached for in your first bouquet of the season, the one you let bloom just so you could admire it out the window. Okay, if you've watched to this point and I still haven't convinced you, if you've ever thought daffodils were just too ordinary to take up space in your garden or on your flower farm, well, let me show you what's possible. Because in this video here, I walk you through the process of creating an early spring arrangement. Now, it's the kind of tutorial that you can follow with whatever blooms that you have on hand. But I use daffodils on purpose, to show you just how much beauty can come from something that's so simple and often overlooked. I hope you'll check it out, and I'll link it for you in the description box below. Now, thank you for being here, friends. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye, guys.